I was alone in the house for the first time in weeks. Daniel had left for his business trip that morning, and the quiet that followed was almost unnerving. As I settled into the solitude, I found myself wandering through the rooms aimlessly, trying to shake off the feeling of emptiness that had taken over. I decided to use the quiet time to catch up on some overdue tasks. As I sat at my desk, I opened my laptop and logged into my email, hoping to clear out the clutter of unread messages. Most of them were routine: bills, newsletters, and the occasional promotional offer. I was about to delete a particularly uninteresting email when I noticed a message from an unfamiliar address. The subject line was simple: "Hi, Christina." My heart skipped a beat. I had no idea who this person was, and my mind raced with possibilities. I hesitated for a moment before clicking open the email. "Hi, Christina," the message began. "I hope this isn't too forward, but I came across your profile and was intrigued. I'm Brad. I saw that you're interested in something from your profile, and I'd love to get to know you better. If you're interested, feel free to reply. Looking forward to hearing from you." 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind. I glanced around the empty room, the silence suddenly feeling louder. What was this? A message from a stranger reaching out to me while my husband was away. My initial reaction was a mix of shock and curiosity. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by an inexplicable sense of intrigue. I clicked back to the inbox and stared at the message. Brad. I wondered who he was and why he was so interested in me. Was this a scam, or was it something more genuine? And why did the idea of getting to know this stranger spark something in me that I couldn't quite explain? I shut my laptop and walked around the house, trying to clear my head. The quiet that had once felt comforting now seemed heavy with unspoken possibilities. I knew I should be focusing on my tasks, but my mind kept drifting back to that email. It was like a door had been opened, and I was standing on the threshold of something unknown. The excitement I felt was unexpected. I tried to dismiss it, reminding myself of my commitments and responsibilities. But as the evening wore on and the house remained eerily quiet, I found myself drawn back to the message, my curiosity burning stronger with each passing moment. I took a deep breath and sat back down at my desk. Maybe it was just a harmless message, a simple conversation. But as I stared at the screen, the thought of what might lie beyond that email was hard to ignore. I couldn't help but wonder, what if this was the start of something new, something that could change everything? With a mix of apprehension and anticipation, I decided to respond. After much deliberation, I finally sat down and crafted a response to Brad's message. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I tried to find the right words, not wanting to come across as too eager or too distant. I finally hit send and leaned back, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The reply came faster than I had expected. Brad's message was warm and engaging, asking more about my interests and sharing a bit about himself. As we exchanged messages back and forth, I began to feel an undeniable connection. His sense of humor, his thoughtful questions, and the way he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say was refreshing. Before I knew it, we had been chatting for hours. Our conversations flowed easily, and I found myself eagerly awaiting each new message. There was an electric undercurrent to our exchanges, a kind of chemistry that was impossible to ignore. It was as if we had known each other forever, despite this being our first interaction. As the days passed, our conversations became more frequent and more personal. Brad suggested we exchange photos, and I agreed with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I wanted to see who this intriguing man was, and I was curious about how he would react to seeing me. When I received the first photo from Brad, my heart skipped a beat. He looked confident and handsome, his smile warm and inviting. I found myself smiling back at the screen, feeling a rush of attraction. I took a deep breath and selected a photo of myself, one where I felt confident and happy. I hit send and waited, my fingers tapping nervously on the edge of my desk. Brad's response was almost immediate. "Wow, you look amazing," he wrote. "I'm really glad we're getting to know each other better. You've got such a warm, genuine smile." I felt a blush creep across my cheeks. His words were flattering and made me feel special. I couldn't help but notice how our visual exchange added a new layer to our connection. Seeing each other's faces made everything feel more real, more personal. As the days turned into weeks, our chats and photo exchanges became a cherished part of my routine. Each message and photo shared built on the growing attraction and interest between us. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once, knowing that I was developing feelings for someone I had met online while still being married. The excitement I felt when receiving Brad's messages and photos was undeniable. It was a new kind of thrill, a reminder of how powerful and exhilarating new connections could be. As I lay in bed at night, replaying our conversations and the images we had shared, I couldn't help but wonder where this path might lead and how this newfound connection would impact my life. I was captivated, and I knew that whatever happened next, things would never be quite the same. I had been anticipating this moment for days. After weeks of exchanging messages and photos, Brad and I finally decided it was time for a video call. The idea was both exciting and nerve-wracking. It felt like the next step in our growing connection, but it also brought a sense of vulnerability that was new to me. As I sat in front of my laptop, I checked my reflection one last time. I had chosen a simple, comfortable outfit and made sure the background was tidy. I took a deep breath, hoping that I wouldn't come across as too nervous. When the screen blinked and Brad's face appeared, I couldn't help but smile. He looked as charming as ever, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. "Hi, Christina," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "Hi, Brad," I replied, my voice tinged with excitement. "It's so nice to finally see you." We both laughed, and the tension seemed to dissipate. Brad's smile was genuine, and it made me feel at ease. We spent the first few minutes exchanging pleasantries, commenting on how strange yet exhilarating it was to see each other in real time. As the conversation flowed, we began to delve into our interests and passions. Brad told me about his love for hiking and how he found solace in nature. I shared my hobbies, like painting and reading, and how they helped me unwind from the daily grind. It felt liberating to talk so openly about things that mattered to us, and I found myself drawn to his enthusiasm and authenticity. Brad's eyes sparkled with interest as he asked questions about my favorite books and the projects I was working on. He listened attentively, and I could sense his genuine curiosity. Our conversation moved seamlessly from topic to topic, covering everything from travel dreams to favorite cuisines. We discovered that we shared a love for Italian food and had both always wanted to visit Italy. At one point, Brad showed me a few pictures from his recent hiking trip, his excitement palpable as he described the breathtaking views and the sense of achievement he felt. I showed him some of my artwork, and he seemed genuinely impressed. His compliments were sincere, and it felt good to share a piece of myself with someone who appreciated it. As we continued to talk, I noticed how easy it was to connect with Brad on a deeper level. The video call allowed us to see each other's reactions and expressions, making our conversation feel more intimate and personal. I felt a growing sense of comfort and attraction, and I could tell that Brad was experiencing the same. The call lasted longer than either of us had planned, and when we finally said our goodbyes, I felt a pang of reluctance. It was clear that this new connection was becoming something more significant, something I hadn't anticipated when I first received his message. As I closed my laptop and sat back in my chair, I couldn't help but replay our conversation in my mind. The video call brought us closer, adding a new dimension to our relationship. I felt a mix of exhilaration and apprehension, knowing that this was only the beginning of what could be a transformative journey. The screen had shown me a glimpse of a potential future, one that was both exciting and uncertain. I knew that this connection with Brad was growing stronger, and I was eager to see where it might lead. Over the past few weeks, our conversations had taken on a new flirtatious tone. What started as friendly exchanges had slowly evolved into something more intimate and charged. Brad's playful comments and the way he teased me had become a highlight of my days. I found myself eagerly anticipating our chats, feeling a rush of excitement every time I saw his name pop up on my screen. One evening, as we were talking about our weekend plans, Brad's message had a different undertone. "I've been thinking a lot about you lately," he wrote. "It's amazing how much we've connected, even through a screen." My heart skipped a beat. I replied with a hint of playful flirtation. "Oh? And what have you been thinking about?" He responded almost instantly. "About how much I'd love to see you in person. I think it would be even better than these amazing conversations we're having." The message sent a shiver down my spine. The idea of meeting Brad in person was both thrilling and terrifying. We had discussed it a few times, but now that the opportunity seemed imminent, I felt a wave of anxiety. The prospect of turning our virtual connection into a real-life encounter was both exciting and daunting. As we continued to flirt, our conversations grew even more personal. Brad would send me sweet, flirtatious messages that made my heart race. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and the things that made us tick. I started to feel a deep emotional connection with him, one that I hadn't anticipated when I first responded to his message. The more our relationship deepened, the more I felt the weight of secrecy. My excitement about Brad was tinged with guilt and worry. Hiding my feelings and our interactions with Daniel was becoming increasingly difficult. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Brad, I felt a pang of anxiety, wondering if someone would notice or find out. The day I had been both eagerly anticipating and dreading finally arrived. I was a whirlwind of emotions as I approached the quaint cafe Brad had chosen for our first in-person meeting. The place was nestled on a quiet street, its warm, inviting glow spilling out onto the sidewalk. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves, and pushed open the door. Inside, the cafe exuded a cozy, intimate atmosphere. Soft jazz played in the background, mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries. The ambient light cast a gentle glow on the rustic wooden tables and plush chairs, creating a setting that felt both relaxed and special. I scanned the room, looking for Brad. I spotted him almost immediately, seated at a corner table. His smile was the first thing I noticed, and it immediately put me at ease. He stood up as I approached, and the warmth in his eyes was unmistakable. "Hi, Christina," he said, his voice as inviting in person as it had been over the phone. "Hi, Brad," I replied, smiling widely. I could feel my nerves beginning to dissolve as we greeted each other. He pulled out a chair for me, and I sat down, feeling a mixture of excitement and relief. We started with small talk, discussing the cafe's menu and the weather, but it didn't take long for the conversation to deepen. Brad's presence was calming, and I found myself opening up more than I had expected. We laughed over shared jokes and stories, and his easygoing manner made me feel comfortable. Brad ordered us both coffee and a selection of pastries. As we sipped our drinks and nibbled on the treats, our conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our hobbies, our favorite movies, and the places we wanted to visit. Each topic seemed to reveal another layer of our personalities, drawing us closer together. At one point, Brad leaned in slightly, his gaze fixed on me with a look of genuine interest. "You know," he said, "I've enjoyed getting to know you. It's funny how sometimes you just click with someone, even if you've only known them online." I felt a flutter in my chest at his words. "I feel the same way," I admitted. "It's strange, but it feels like we've known each other much longer." The conversation turned to more personal topics, and I felt a growing sense of intimacy between us. Brad shared some of his dreams and aspirations, and I found myself admiring his passion and determination. He listened attentively as I spoke about my own goals and the things that mattered to me. The connection between us felt tangible, and I couldn't deny the attraction that was building. As the afternoon wore on, we both realized how easily the time had slipped away. The cafe was beginning to empty, but neither of us seemed eager to leave. We continued talking, our conversation now punctuated by moments of comfortable silence. I could feel the chemistry between us, an electric current that made every touch and glance feel charged with meaning. When it was finally time to say goodbye, Brad walked me to the door. He took my hand in his touch warm and reassuring. "I had a great time today," he said softly. "I hope we can do this again soon." I smiled, feeling a mix of happiness and longing. "I'd like that," I replied. "I really would." As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt a sense of exhilaration. Meeting Brad in person had exceeded my expectations, and the connection we had established was undeniable. The cafe had been the perfect setting for our first encounter, and I couldn't wait to see where this newfound relationship would lead. The thrill of seeing Brad had quickly become a cherished part of my routine. Every secret meeting was a dance of excuses and half-truths, each one carefully crafted to mask the reality of my growing involvement with him. I found myself increasingly adept at spinning stories that kept my absence from home plausible. On Tuesday afternoon, I told Daniel that I had a last-minute meeting with a client, an explanation I had used more times than I cared to count. I could sense the weight of my lies every time I said them, but the thrill of seeing Brad in person was always too enticing to resist. We met at a quiet park near the city, where the trees and benches offered a semblance of privacy. Our conversations were always filled with laughter and affection, a stark contrast to the guilt that simmered beneath the surface. Despite the joy these moments with Brad brought me, they were also accompanied by a constant undercurrent of anxiety. I struggled with the dichotomy of my life, the warmth and excitement of my secret meetings with Brad juxtaposed against the cold reality of my deceit towards Daniel. Every time I saw Brad, I felt a pang of guilt, a reminder that I was betraying someone who trusted me. I vividly remember one evening when I returned home after an especially meaningful meeting with Brad. The evening had been magical, filled with intimate conversations and stolen glances. But as I walked through the door and saw Daniel sitting on the couch, his face illuminated by the glow of the television, the weight of my actions hit me like a ton of bricks. "How was your day?" Daniel asked, looking up from his book. I forced a smile, trying to sound casual. "Busy, but productive. Had a lot of work to catch up on." He nodded, his eyes scanning my face for any sign of the truth. "You look tired. Everything okay?" I nodded again, but internally I was wrestling with the guilt that threatened to consume me. I knew that my time with Brad was bringing me joy, but it was also creating a chasm between Daniel and me, one that seemed to widen with every lie I told. The internal conflict was a constant companion. I was torn between the exhilarating connection I felt with Brad and the creeping sense of betrayal I felt towards Daniel. Each stolen moment with Brad felt like a betrayal of the life I had built with my husband. I loved the way Brad made me feel alive, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing guilt that accompanied every rendezvous. One evening, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, my thoughts churned with doubt and regret. I had just returned from a clandestine dinner with Brad, where we talked about our future and shared our deepest fears and dreams. The intimacy of our conversations was intoxicating, but as I replayed them in my mind, I was haunted by the realization of how far I had strayed from my commitment to Daniel. The decision to keep up this double life was weighing heavily on me. I knew that I couldn't continue to live in this constant state of deception forever. The emotional toll of juggling two lives was becoming increasingly apparent, and I was beginning to question whether the joy I found with Brad was worth the cost of my integrity and my marriage. As I closed my eyes, I tried to focus on the positive aspects of my time with Brad, but the image of Daniel's hurt expression kept intruding. I knew that the path I was on was unsustainable, and I had to confront the reality of my situation sooner or later. The guilt was becoming too heavy to bear, and I had to decide whether I would continue to navigate this treacherous balance or face the consequences of my choices. The excitement of my secret meetings with Brad had begun to settle into a routine, but recently, I sensed a shift in our conversations. It was subtle at first, an occasional question about the future, an offhand remark about what our lives might look like if we were together more openly. But over time, these questions became more frequent and direct, and they were starting to weigh heavily on me. One evening, as we sat in a cozy cafe we frequented, Brad leaned forward, his expression serious. "Christina, I've been thinking a lot about us lately," he said, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "I know we've been keeping things casual, but I'm starting to wonder where this is all heading. What do you see for our future?" I felt a jolt at his words. The comfort of our secret meetings had always been accompanied by an unspoken agreement to avoid discussing long-term plans. Now, however, his question forced me to confront the reality of our situation and the growing conflict within me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Brad, I wasn't expecting us to talk about this right now," I began, searching for the right words. "I've been enjoying our time together, but things are complicated for me. I'm married, and there are a lot of factors I need to consider." Brad's brow furrowed slightly, and he took a sip of his coffee before responding. "I understand that it's complicated, I do. But I can't help but think about what could be if we were more open with each other. I'm starting to feel like I need to know where this is going." His words struck a chord. I had been avoiding these questions, hoping that our relationship would continue to evolve naturally without needing to define it. But now, with Brad's growing desire for clarity, I was forced to face the truth of my situation. "I'm torn, Brad," I admitted, my voice tinged with frustration and uncertainty. "I care about you deeply, and our time together has been incredible. But I also have a life and a marriage that I'm not willing to jeopardize lightly. I need to figure out what I want and how to navigate this without causing more harm." Brad's expression softened, but there was a hint of disappointment in his eyes. I don't want to pressure you, Christina. I just need to understand where I stand and what the future might look like for us. I've been feeling like I'm in limbo, and it's starting to wear on me. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. The internal conflict I had been grappling with now felt like a tangible force pressing down on me. The more Brad asked about our future, the more I realized how unprepared I was to make any definitive choices. Maybe we need to take a step back and evaluate our priorities, I suggested, my voice trembling slightly. I need to figure out what this relationship means to me and what I'm willing to sacrifice for it. And I need to be honest with myself and with Daniel about where I am. Brad sighed and reached across the table to take my hand. I understand, he said softly. I don't want to rush you or make things more difficult. I just want to be clear about what I'm hoping for. As we sat in the cafe, the future of our relationship seemed more uncertain than ever. The passion and connection we shared were undeniable, but the complications of my marriage and the questions about our long-term plans were creating a rift. I knew that I had to confront these issues head-on and decide whether I was willing to make the necessary changes in my life for the sake of our relationship. The crossroads of commitment lay before me, and I had to choose between continuing to navigate the complexities of my dual life or making a decisive choice about the future with Brad. The decision was mine, and it was clear that whatever path I chose would have profound implications for both my personal life and my relationship with Brad. The tension in our home had been escalating over the past few weeks. Daniel, my husband, had started to notice that something was off. It wasn't anything overt, just small changes in my behavior, uncharacteristic absences, and a growing distance between us. Our once peaceful household now seemed to be filled with undercurrents of suspicion and discontent. It began with minor irritations. Daniel would comment on how I seemed preoccupied, or how I had been coming home later than usual. I'd brush off his concerns with vague explanations, but the cracks in our relationship were becoming harder to ignore. The more I tried to reassure him, the more our conversations seemed to devolve into arguments. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, the air was thick with unspoken words. Daniel's irritation was palpable as he glanced at me across the table. "You've been distant lately," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "Is there something you want to talk about?" I looked down at my plate, struggling to find a response that wouldn't reveal the truth. "I've just been busy with work," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's nothing to worry about." Daniel's expression hardened. "It's not just work. You're different, and I can't help but feel like you're hiding something from me." I felt a pang of guilt as I met his gaze. "Daniel, I'm not hiding anything. It's just been a stressful time, that's all." The conversation ended in a terse silence, and I could feel the weight of Daniel's suspicions pressing down on me. I knew that my attempts to placate him were wearing thin, and the growing strain between us was becoming more evident. Despite my efforts to mend things with Daniel, my feelings for Brad were only intensifying. Our secret meetings had become a lifeline for me, a source of excitement and passion that I had been missing in my marriage. Every time I saw Brad, I felt a rush of emotions that were impossible to ignore. I found myself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, there was my life with Daniel, stable, familiar, but increasingly fraught with tension. On the other hand, there was Brad, new, thrilling, and full of promise, but also fraught with its own set of challenges and uncertainties. One evening, after another strained conversation with Daniel, I retreated to the solitude of my bedroom. My phone buzzed with a message from Brad, and I felt a familiar flutter of excitement. As I read his words, I was reminded of the connection we shared and the future we had been discussing. But the guilt was unbearable. I knew that continuing this secret relationship was causing harm to my marriage, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was living a double life. I needed to make a decision, but the choice between staying with Daniel and pursuing a future with Brad seemed increasingly insurmountable. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized that I couldn't keep living in this state of limbo. The choice between these two worlds, one built on years of shared history and stability, the other on newfound passion and excitement, was becoming more pressing. I had to decide whether to confront the issues in my marriage head-on or to fully commit to the new relationship that had taken root in my heart. The weight of the decision was almost too much to bear. My heart was torn between the familiar comfort of my life with Daniel and the thrilling yet uncertain future with Brad. Each path came with its own set of consequences, and the road ahead was anything but clear. In the quiet of the night, I knew that I needed to find a way to resolve this conflict. The choice was mine to make, and it was clear that whatever decision I reached would have a profound impact on both my personal life and my future with Brad. The time had come to confront the reality of my situation and to choose between the two worlds that were now vying for my heart. The evening had started like any other. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, trying to push away the turmoil inside me. Daniel had been working late, and I welcomed the rare moment of peace. I was lost in thought when the unexpected happened. Daniel came home earlier than usual. He was carrying a stack of papers and had a distracted look on his face. I could tell something was off from the moment he walked in. He didn't even say hello as he tossed the papers onto the kitchen counter and started rummaging through a drawer. I watched him, a knot forming in my stomach. My phone buzzed on the kitchen island. It was a message from Brad, but I didn't think much of it until I saw Daniel's eyes flicker to the screen. His face went pale as he picked up my phone and read the message. "Is this what I think it is?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The shock and betrayal in his eyes were palpable. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. "Danny, let me explain," I started, but he was already scrolling through my messages and photos. The scene that unfolded was like something out of a nightmare. He saw the intimate photos Brad had sent, the flirty messages, and the plans we'd made to meet. The tension exploded into a confrontation. Daniel's face was a mix of anger and heartbreak as he threw my phone down on the counter. "How could you do this to me?" he shouted. His voice cracked with emotion, and the pain was evident. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "It just happened. I never meant to hurt you." Daniel was pacing now, his anger morphing into deep, searing hurt. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me?" I couldn't look him in the eye. "It started a few months ago. I didn't know it would go this far." The room was charged with an unbearable heaviness. Daniel's accusations, the disappointment in his voice, it all cut through me like a knife. I was faced with the consequences of my choices, and the weight of my betrayal was overwhelming. As the night wore on, we talked, or rather we argued, until Daniel's anger gave way to a profound sadness. The realization of what I had done, the hurt I had caused, it all sank in. When the shouting finally stopped, Daniel was quiet, his face buried in his hands. He looked at me one last time, a mixture of pain and resignation in his eyes. "I need time to process this," he said. "I don't know what to do or how to move forward." I felt a pang of guilt and regret as I watched him leave the room, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The house felt cold and empty, and the reality of my situation hit me hard. The next few days were a blur. Daniel moved out temporarily, staying with a friend while we both tried to process what had happened. The house, once a symbol of stability and comfort, now felt like a cage. During this tumultuous period, I had to confront the hardest choice of all. With Daniel out of the house, I was left alone with my thoughts and my emotions. I needed to decide whether to fight for my marriage or to pursue a future with Brad. The choice was agonizing. On one hand, there was the life I had built with Daniel, filled with years of shared history and commitment. On the other hand, there was Brad, someone who had brought excitement and passion into my life, but who also represented a huge unknown. I spent countless hours thinking about what was at stake. My marriage was in ruins, but the love I felt for Brad was real and intense. I knew that whatever choice I made would have profound implications for both my future and my sense of self. In the quiet moments of reflection, I had to ask myself if I was ready to rebuild what I had torn apart, or if I was prepared to fully embrace the new path that lay ahead with Brad. The decision was mine alone to make, and the weight of it was almost unbearable. As I stood at the crossroads of my life, I knew that my next steps would shape my future in ways I could scarcely imagine. The path forward was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I had reached the breaking point, and now I had to choose how to move forward. I sat in the cafe, my hands nervously stirring the coffee in my cup. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room, but I felt anything but warm inside. Today was the day I had to face Brad and explain everything. The culmination of months of secret meetings, unspoken truths, and emotional turmoil. Brad arrived right on time, his usual confident stride tempered by an unusual seriousness. He spotted me immediately and gave me a small, uncertain smile as he approached. I stood to greet him, trying to muster a composure I didn't feel. The weight of our last conversation was heavy between us. "Hey, Christina," Brad said, his voice soft but carrying a note of concern. "I'm glad you could meet. I know things have been complicated." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Yes, they have. Thank you for coming." We sat down, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The cafe buzzed with the low hum of conversations and clinking cups, but it felt like a world away. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before plunging into what I needed to say. "Brad, I don't even know where to start," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "The last few days have been a whirlwind. Daniel found out about us. He's hurt, confused, and honestly, I don't even know where we stand right now." Brad's face fell, and he leaned back in his chair, clearly taken aback. "I'm so sorry to hear that. I never wanted to be the cause of such turmoil. I hoped we could find a way to make this work." I looked down at my hands, struggling to find the right words. "I never intended for things to get this complicated. I care about you, Brad, I do. But I've been married to Daniel for years, and there's a lot to consider. I've been torn between my life with him and my feelings for you." Brad sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I understand. It's a tough situation. I don't want to push you into making any decisions you're not ready for. But I also don't want to be just an afterthought in your life." I met his gaze, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. "I've been struggling with this. I don't want to lose what we have, but I also don't want to hurt Daniel further. I need to figure out if I can fix my marriage or if I need to move forward with you." Brad's expression softened, and he reached across the table, taking my hand gently. "Christina, whatever you decide, I want you to be happy. I know this isn't easy, and I'm willing to wait for you to make the right choice. I just need to know where we stand." I squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of emotion. "I wish I could give you a clear answer right now. I need time to think and to sort out my feelings, but I promise you that I'm committed to being honest with you." Brad nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and resignation. "I appreciate that. Take all the time you need. Just know that I'm here, and I care about you." As we finished our coffee, I felt a bittersweet mixture of relief and sadness. The path ahead was still uncertain, but at least I had a clear sense of where Brad stood. We parted ways with a promise to stay in touch, and I was left alone with my thoughts. Walking back to my car, I felt the weight of the choices that lay ahead. The clarity I'd hoped for was still elusive, but I knew I needed to take the time to figure out my next steps. The final decision would come with its own set of challenges, but I was determined to face them with honesty and courage. As I drove home, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road. The end of one chapter was nearing, and the beginning of another was yet to be written. The decision had been made, and with it came the inevitable shift in my life. I had spent countless hours weighing my feelings, reflecting on my marriage, and considering the future with Brad. It was a process fraught with uncertainty and emotional turbulence, but I finally reached a conclusion that felt right for me. It wasn't an easy choice. Daniel and I had shared years of memories and a life that wasn't easy to unravel. But the truth was, the emotional connection I had with Brad was something I couldn't ignore. It was genuine, and it had grown into something meaningful that I wanted to explore further. I spent the day after making my decision packing up my belongings and preparing for the next step in my journey. It felt surreal to be sorting through the fragments of a life that had once seemed so stable. I carefully placed away mementos of my marriage, knowing that the future was now a blank canvas. Brad and I had agreed to meet in a quiet park, a place where we could talk away from the distractions of our everyday lives. As I arrived, I saw him waiting by a bench, looking both hopeful and nervous. The sight of him brought a smile to my face, a small reminder of why I had made this choice. "Hi, Christina," Brad said softly as I approached. "I've been thinking about this meeting all week." "Hi, Brad," I replied, taking a deep breath. "So have I." We sat down together, and I could sense the weight of anticipation in the air. I took a moment to gather my thoughts before speaking. "I have made my decision. I've decided to move forward with our relationship. I've realized that I need to follow my heart and explore what we have together. Brad's eyes lit up with a mix of relief and joy. I'm so glad to hear that. I've been waiting for this moment, and I want you to know how much this means to me. I nodded, feeling a surge of emotion. I know it won't be easy. There will be challenges and we'll need to navigate them together, but I believe that we can build something special. As we continued our conversation, I felt a new sense of optimism about our future. Brad and I talked about our plans, dreams, and how we would face the challenges that lay ahead. We were both committed to making our relationship work and starting a new chapter in our lives. The process of leaving my marriage had been heart-wrenching, and I knew it would take time to heal and adjust. But I also recognized that this experience had taught me valuable lessons about love, honesty, and the importance of following one's heart. Brad and I began to build our relationship on a new foundation, grounded in our shared values and a deep emotional connection. We approached our future with excitement and determination, ready to face whatever came our way. Looking back, I understood that the journey had not been easy, but it had led me to a place where I could embrace the future with clarity and purpose. I learned the importance of being true to oneself, even when faced with difficult decisions. As I walked hand in hand with Brad into this new chapter, I felt a sense of hope and possibility that made every challenge worthwhile.